Allah,
Father of the universe,
Father of the universe,
Father of love,
Father of love,
truth, peace, freedom, and justice. Allah is my protector,
Allah is my protector,
my guide,
my God,
and my salvation,
and my salvation,
by night and by day. Through his holy prophet, Drew Ali. Amen. Please remain standing for the reading of the bylaws.
The Moorish Science Temple of America, the Divine Constitution and Bylaws. Act 1. The Grand Sheik and the Chairman of the Moorish Science Temple of America is empowered to make law and enforce laws with the assistance of the Prophet and the Grand Body of the Moorish Science Temple of America. The Assistant Grand Sheik is to assist the Grand Sheik in all affairs if he lives according to love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice, and it is known before the members of the Moorish Science Temple of America. Act 2. All meetings are to be opened and closed properly according to the Circle 7 and love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. Friday is our holy day of rest because on a Friday the first man was formed in flesh, and on a Friday the first man departed out of flesh and ascended unto his Father, God Allah. For that cause, Friday is a holy day for all Muslims all over the world. Act 3. Love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice must be proclaimed and practiced by all members of the Moorish Science Temple of America. No member is to put in danger or accuse falsely his brother or sister on any occasion at all that may harm his brother or sister, because Allah is love. Act 4. All members must preserve these holy and divine laws, and all members must obey the laws of the government, because by being a Moorish American, you are a part and partial of the government and must live the life accordingly. Act 5. This organization of the Moorish Science Temple of America is not to cause any confusion or to overthrow the laws and constitution of the said government, but to obey hereby. Act 6. With us, all members must proclaim their nationality. We are teaching our people their nationality and their divine creed, that they may know that they are a part and a partial of this said government, and know that they are not Negroes, colored folks, black people, or Ethiopians, because these names were given to slaves by slaveholders in 1779 and lasted until 1865 during the time of slavery. But this is a new era of time now, and all men now must proclaim their free national name to be recognized by the government in which they live and the nations of the earth. This is the reason why Allah, the great God of the universe, ordained noble Drew Ali, the prophet, to redeem his people from their sinful ways. The Moorish Americans are the descendants of the ancient Moabites who inhabited the northwestern and southwestern shores of Africa. Act 7. All members must promptly attend their meetings and become a part and a partial of all uplifting acts of the Moorish Science Temple of America. Members must pay their dues and keep in line with all necessities of the Moorish Science Temple of America. Then you are entitled to the name of faithful. Husband, you must support your wife and children. Wife, you must obey your husband and take care of your children and look after the duties of your household. Sons and daughters must obey father and mother and be industrious and become a part of the uplifting of fallen humanity. All Moorish Americans must keep their hearts and minds pure with love and their bodies clean with water. This divine covenant is from your holy prophet, Noble Drew Ali, through the guidance of his Father, God Allah. Noble Drew Ali, founder, Moorish American Prayer. Allah, the Father of the universe, the Father of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. Allah is my protector, my guide, and my salvation, by night and by day. Through his holy prophet, Drew Ali. Amen. Moorish Science Temple of America, home office of Noble Drew Ali, Chicago, Illinois, USA.
Islam.
We want to thank everybody for coming out. The Moorish Science Temple of America. This is Subordinate Temple. This is Subordinate Temple 12. And if you see, everybody look familiar that's in here, but just in case they don't know, if you need to move around, you'll see people with their hand up. That's just giving respect to the person that's speaking and let you know that you're going to be moving around. If there's any questions at any time, you can just raise your hand and say Islam, and we'll be called right on you, because this is not a dictation or any kind. It's more of a class. So we're looking for you to just chime in when you feel the need to, and we're going to try to give a little bit of information. Does anybody have any questions before we get started? Particular questions? No? So at that point, I'm going to turn it over to the Skeikess.
All righty then. All righty then. First, I want to give praise to Allah for allowing us all to be here today. I look out that window and it's beautiful, and it brings everything to me of how we're all connected. and how we're connected to everything that's around us. And I want to give honors to the first Supreme Grand Sheik, Brother Elihu, and all down through the line, the lineage to all divine Supreme Grand Sheiks up into our current Supreme Grand Sheik, Brother Elihu. First, I want to read to you a reading from the Prophet's literature. The Prophet warns all Muslims to be read in every meeting. And I want you to think about what I'm saying in the context of, think about it in the context of how many of these things we actually do, what the words meant back then and what they still mean today. I hereby inform all members that they must end all radical speeches while at work, in their homes, or on the streets. We are for peace and not destruction. Stop flashing your cards at Europeans. It causes confusion. Remember, your cards for your salvation. Failure to obey these orders will be of severe consequence. We are for love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. And when these principles are violated, justice must then take its course. Any member or group of members who hold malicious feelings toward the temple or the prophet or violate the divine covenant of the Moorish movement will receive their reward from Allah for their unjust deeds. All true Moors will and must obey the laws as laid down to them by their prophet. If they lose confidence in their prophet, they should turn in their card and button, cease wearing their turban and fez, and return to the state where I, the prophet, found you. This is a holy and divine movement, founded by the prophet Noble Drali. And if the prophet is not right, the temple is not right. The prophet, therefore, is sending out the divine plea to all Moorish Americans that they do their part in protecting their prophet and the temple. This is an everlasting movement founded by the prophet through the will of Allah to redeem his people from their sinful ways. Peace, Noble Drali. Islam, that's always, that every time I read it, it's always powerful to me, and what the words actually mean when I think about the word salvation. When anybody out there, when you think about the word salvation, what do you think about? Nothing. Don't think about nothing. You think about the 26. I had to get one. It's the end of the year. I had to get one. Yeah, I do. So what do y'all think about when you think about the word salvation? You know, what have you thought about in the past? Because all of our past experiences shape us, which includes something that might have happened last week, or it could be something from childhood. So what do you think about?
I think of salvation as like a safe haven.
Salvation like a safe haven. That's nice. I like that. Anybody else?
I say complete cycle, I guess, or
Complete.
like pretty much just like a elevation.
Elevation. Salvation and elevation. Okay. What you think about?
Well, salvation would be, actually, it has two parts. We have a earthly salvation, and we have a spiritual. We have more spiritual salvation, meaning that if I was to go to a Buddhist temple, I would still be able to have my spiritual salvation. If I went to a Christian church, I would still be able to have my spiritual salvation. However, my earthly salvation, which involves all of the things that I'm going to need from my people to survive, like my neighbors, my people around me, the people that think like I think, have the same creed as I do, want the same thing for their kids as I want for mine. As opposed to if I was in a Chinese situation where the demonstration was in Chinese, I wouldn't understand, and it wouldn't give me a lot of earthly salvation. It wouldn't provide a lot of earthly salvation for me because I really don't understand what's going on. And it ain't built for me. It's built for them particular people. So there's nothing wrong with that. It's just I need political salvation for myself and for my people. So the structure that's built for me is the Moorish Science Temple of America, which is Islam. So that's created for me to have an earthly salvation. So we have two salvations. We have our earthly salvation and we have our spiritual salvation. So if you want both, then you would be in a place that can provide it. If you're just interested in spiritual salvation, then you can receive that here also. Islam?
Islam. I don't think I could have calculated any better.
Islam.
So, which as we talk about, there's those two things. I don't think about them as a dichotomy. I think about them as actually being one and the same because they're an integral part of me. which brings me to what our lesson is actually about today. Our lesson is going to be about the unity of life and unity overall. And I think that was a great segue into unity. Yeah, right on in there. See how that works. Does everybody have their question? No, that's okay. I'll share it with you. That's okay. I'll share it with you.
I don't know why they keep disappearing, but they do.
Well, sometimes when we sharing things with people and the people get it, Allah knows they need it more than we do.
Right.
And it kind of walks away. Next thing you know, they in here. So it is what it is. So it's okay. We're going to share. So as we're talking about the unity of life, I'll read you. I'll answer. You read or I'll answer. I'll read. You answer. All right. Starting on page 4, question number 65. What is the devil sometimes called?
The Lord self.
Nobody's in
How many selves are there?
Two.
Name them.
Higher and lower selves.
What people represent the higher self?
The angels who protect the holy city of Mecca.
Okay, so to take a pause right there, we just talked about the two selves, which that means that those two things are in us. And we talked about what they're actually called, correct? And there's sometimes when you'll see a cartoon or a television show and there's an angel and a devil on the shoulders, because those two things actually reside in each and every one of us. Islam?
Wow.
Okay. What people represent the higher self?
Those who cast out of the holy city of those who accept the teaching.
No. Back up again. Back up. It was a repeat. Which people represent the higher self?
The higher self is the mother of the virtues.
I'm on number 68.
The angels. Say the angels who protect.
The angels who protect the holy city.
I did read it already, but there's a reason that I'm reading it again.
Must be a bait thing. Must be a bait thing.
Okay, so the people who represent the higher self, the angels who protect the holy city of Mecca. And what people represent the lower self? Excuse me, I'm scared now.
We're gonna do it again.
Who represents the lower self?
Those who were cast out of the holy city and those who accept their teaching.
Okay, so the reason that I read that one again is because I wanted those two things to be together. Because if we're talking about the higher and the lower self, and they're both inside of us, if we look at both things together, we get a better understanding of both things together.
But Adam and Eve be considered.
I don't think that's something that this class could actually go into right now.
They have it.
Absolutely. We all have higher and lower selves. So when we think about it, the more that we think about it, putting those two things together, like when we think about hot and cold, if you have no concept of hot, then you really have no concept of cold. So, and I want, like for me, I have to think about them like that because it works in my brain. Otherwise, I would just be reading and memorizing, and that would just be memorization. I need to absorb it in order to be able to apply it. What is the higher self? That's 70.
Higher self is the mother.
And the harmonies of
And
life.
harmonies of life. It breeds justice, mercy, love, and right.
Can the higher self pass away?
No.
Why?
Because it is a law.
What does the lower self breed?
Hatred, slander, lewdness, murder, theft, and everything that harms.
And what did the higher self say to the lower self at one time when he met him?
Where are you going, Satan?
We know that part. What was the answer that the lower self gave the higher self?
I
go to and fro.
Has he finished his task of devouring?
No.
Yes.
Yes.
I mean, yes.
When was his time to clear it out? When he nailed Jesus on the cross. What are the last words Jesus uttered?
It is
Finished.
And what did he have reference to?
He had reference to the end of state.
Islam? Okay, so again, the importance of that for me and please chime in, is that we have to remember that unity, that not dichotomy, because those are two separate things, but if both things are inside of you, we gotta find a balance. And you always talk about finding that balance, because people try to reach for perfected man and think that if I'm not perfect at that time, then I've backslid.
Right.
How many of you heard that term? Mhm. A lot of times. Okay, so the actual lesson is coming out of chapter 3, which is on page 7, is I.
Can't miss it.
Okay, I'm gonna read you again.
It's on.
Elihu's lessons, the unity of life. Again, Elihu met his pupils in the sacred grove and said, "No man live unto himself, for every living thing is bound by cords to every other living thing. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will love and not demand love in return. They will not do to other men what they would not have other men do unto them."
It's anybody want to have any statements or anything you want to make on that?
Treat others as you treat yourself.
That's
It's
your brother
love.
said, treat others as you treat yourself. Anybody else? Any kind of comments? The sister looked like she wanted to comment.
She does a few times.
She holding it back till she can wow us. I guess.
That might be it.
Wait.
You know, sisters.
It said, no man lives unto himself, for every living thing is bound by cords to every other living thing. So does that mean that we all have a wire connecting us some kind of way, or something that bounds us together physically? So it's speaking about the man that's inside. So if we're speaking to the sister, then it would be the man that's inside. It's the same man that we're speaking about. It's the part of us that never ceased to exist, that will always be. And that is what we will be connected to. We connected with each other. So let's say I start to read and I come to a greater understanding of what a law is and my function in society towards other men and women, and you do the same thing. Well, we'll be bound by that cord of understanding. And that creates what we're talking about is the unity. That simple understanding and perseverance along the lines of trying to get better as a person. So now me and you are connected by those cords. Now, let's say you don't know that, but I know it. We still connect. You see? So you still connected to every other person and every other thing. Because once you come to that full realization, it's easy to see that you need the tree, that you need the people, that you need all of these other things, and it's all one existence. Islam?
No.
No.
Now, because I like to throw science and everything, it
That's
wouldn't
a
be
good
me
thing.
if I
That's a
did.
good thing.
I like to throw science and everything. When we're thinking about or talking about these things and talking about how we're connected, and we actually want to say, you might want to say, okay, well, how can that possibly be? Have you ever seen, there's experiments where it might be a set of twins, it might be people who don't know each other at all, where they actually think the same thought and come up with the same thing. They do it with couples all the time. What do you think her answer was? What do you think his answer was? That's something that right here on the earth is tangible that actually shows that to us. The other thing that I wanted to point out is that when I read the first one, again, Elihu met with his pupils, it dawned on me that some people might not know who those pupils were.
Right.
And that is a great significance because it sets up some of our structure. Those pupils were actually Mary and Elizabeth, who were the mothers of Jesus and John. So, and I say that because a lot of people are unfamiliar with a structure that has a more matriarchal foundation than a patriarchal foundation because of the colonization that we generally live in. And the third thing is he kept referring to man. Sometimes that confuses people. And I remember when I first heard it, I was kind of offended. What you mean the man? So the woman don't count? But what he's speaking on and what's being spoke on here is the spirit self. So when you think of yourself as 3 different parts that are rolled into one, which is different than the higher self and the lower self. We have a physical body, we have a soul that's malleable and it can go towards the wants of the higher self or the wants of the lower self. And then we have a spirit. And the spirit doesn't have a gender attached to it, but we just get so used to male or female, man or woman, boy or girl. So the spirit man is actually genderless. And if you think about it, man is the common thing that's in man and woman.
That's loud.
So number 5, there are 2 selves, the higher and the lower self. The higher self is a human spirit clothed with soul, made in the form of Allah. The lower self, the carnal self, the body of desires, is a reflection of higher self, distorted by the murky ethers of the flesh. The lower self is an illusion and will pass away. The higher self is Allah and man and will not pass away. The higher self is the embodiment of truth. The lower self is truth reversed, and so is falsehood manifest. That you sound like you got something you want to say right there.
I'm saying stop, because I know people like, what is that all about? So, is everybody able to look at that? And is there any questions on that? She said there are 2 selves, the higher self and the lower self. Is there any questions on the higher self and the lower self? Which goes into the higher self is human spirit, clothed with soul, made in the form of Allah. And then we have the lower self, the carnal self, the body of desires. So does anybody have any questions or any statements about that? Because that's a lot. That's a lot. Considering how we were bombarded with the colonization process of how this is supposed to work. That we go to church and then we get these indoctrinations. This is starkly different from that, saying that we have a lower self that has desires, and we have a higher self that is in the line of what a law is. You know what I'm saying? So we have a soul. So do we have any questions concerning any of that?
Comments? What are y'all thoughts?
Somebody got to have
I
something.
know,
on that,
he
because
looked
that's
like
me.
that brother right there looked like he want to say something.
Was that a question?
All right.
Oh, he had his
That's
name.
I think it's almost pretty self-explanatory. As in the higher and the lower self, like the higher self is the one that's going to live on forever, and the lower self is going to pass or die off. So self-explanatory.
For most people, they believe that the soul is going to be living on forever. And that's what's going to heaven or hell in that sense. So, but here, it's for us, it's telling us that the soul is a creation of Allah. Therefore, it must come to pass. All the things that have been created will come to a point that it must pass away. The body itself continues to function under the guidance of the soul. But when the body passes, then the soul no longer needs to remain here. So it moves to the plane of soul. And there it abides, and it continues a growing process to seek to become perfected, to bring out the spirit self in its full blossom. So when the body goes, life is still going on. Life does not stop with the death of the body. The body just stops, but life continues on. 2 separate things. When the soul passes, life continues on. So there's no point in time where you won't have life. So that is starkly different from a Christian upbringing, at least the one that I received. I was bombarded with constantly, which was hard for me to understand. How could I possibly die? Because I never felt like I would. And this was quite a difficult upbringing for me when I was young, because I felt like I couldn't die. You know, so now I understand where that comes from. You know, the part of you that's the real part of you that's not going to die does not have an effect on time. The time is not affected. So you're not in a situation where you have to fear death. I'm not saying I'm about to run out in front of a semi-truck
That's good, because you're not a teenager no
Right.
more, and risk-taking behaviors
It's
is
over
teenagers
with.
over.
I'm not even bungee jumping, you know, I'm
No.
not doing none of that.
No.
But some of y'all have, you know, y'all still young. Though. Yeah,
I was just gonna add, like, that's something different too, like heaven or hell, what I'm coming to accept is more a state of mind than a physical place. You know, I just heard a guy at work, you know, we was talking about somebody getting hurt, and, you know, he was like, I hope he's been good. I was gonna tell him where he's gonna go to heaven or hell, and I just said to myself, I ain't going there, you know, but yeah, heaven, so I'm just saying heaven or hell can be is a state of mind, more than somewhere in the sky versus below physical.
Well, if he be good, Santa Claus is gonna bring him something. He might not get cold in his stocking. You
If
know?
he be good, Santa Claus gonna bring him some 20.
If he don't,
Gotta get 26.
He just gets
28.
if he don't be good, they don't ship him to Spain where Black Pete live at.
You're gonna go up there with black
You don't
people.
get to see
Now-
Black.
What the brothers are actually talking about, because we love humor, we love what we do, we love where we are in life, is that you have karmic debt, which builds up about things that you've done, and whether they're good or bad, because karma has been said to be a double-edged sword. Karma can be good, karma can be bad, but the amount of time that you spend in your own personal hell, where the soul is at, dealing with those things, is based on how much of the bad or good karmic debt you actually have.
Well, you know that there's no particular point you would get to where you can say, hey, well, I failed at this, because you guarantee a good ending, because the purpose of all of your ailments is to bring about the right state of mind, to bring you towards perfection. So when you have a mishap, it's a learning experience. When somebody is inflicted with let's say cancer or something, then that would be considered an evil. The infliction of the cancer or AIDS or something would be considered an evil thing that's occurring to them. Now, how they stand up during the evil that's attacking them is the learning process. So that person can say, I'm inflicted with all this, I don't know what I could have done to receive all this, but the law is the greatest thing. You know, so that's all I can muster up right now, because I'm in pain and everything else. But that is the point of it, is to bring about the cleansing process, to bring you towards that point of realizing that your body is not dictating anything to your spirit. Your body is meant to pass. It's meant for you to be guiding your body in your efforts and influencing other people with rightful behavior. Islam?
That's all I'm asking after that too. All right, so what you're saying, like, when we was bombarded with the indoctrination, I think that like said it. So the message of what they're saying here is pretty much saying the Lord self is the flesh of the devil, higher self is the spirit, clothed in the form of Allah. So basically saying if the spirit is enclosed in the form of Allah by itself, but if it's a spirit by itself, what would it be exactly? Like the other things are spirits and the soul is not clothed by Allah. Is it just kind of there or what?
The higher self?
No, it's the spirit itself.
Yeah, well, the spirit, you wouldn't, the spirit, like when the body passed,
Yeah.
The soul and the spirit moves to the soul plane. And that means that it's vibrating at a different rate. It slows down from the soul plane to manifestation, meaning that it's slowed down enough, the vibration is slowed down enough for you to visibly see it. An example would be a bike wheel that's turning. You can't see the spoke, but if you stick your finger in there, you'll find it.
I bet you will.
So the faster something goes, the less visible it is. So the vibrations is fast. So as you lose the soul, it speeds up even faster. Now it's back one with the law. You see, so once the soul passes, then the spirit is released, and now it's moving fast as light and everything else. Now it's able to move back to Allah. You see?
And more belief, do they believe the spirits exist anything outside him?
Yes, there are spirits out there. Yes, there are
I
spirits.
guess what I'm asking is, when I specifically, like, when they say clothed in Allah, it just made me think, so if it's not clothed, then it's not considered higher self. But
No.
lower self is carnal.
Islam, not clothed in Allah. The spirit is a part of Allah.
That's all.
So it's, the spirit just exists. It's that thing that is just there that connects all of us, because that's the part of alive man. I thought that was what you were asking. Then I got caught up listening to you.
Right.
Then I was listening to you and I was like, wait a minute. Yeah. So did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and other things do have spirits, yes. So it's not just, we just have that one thing and that's it. All of these things were on as the creation began, if you read in chapter 1, as creation began, they set on the soul plane. And then the essence of the things that you see now began there. And as the vibrations slowed down, they were manifest in the here. So your trees, smells, tastes, all those things were essence in the soul plane. That as things slowed down was manifested in our on earth now. So that's what we're doing. Did you have something you were saying?
Well, no, I was gonna go back to what you were saying, the same thing, about body, soul, and spirit, Kai and Bob. But I was saying it was similar to the concept of rocket and rocket boosters. As it goes up, it drops. When the first blast off, it shoots the first capsule, it does the second one. So it's kind of like what you were saying.
I see what you're saying, yeah.
So the thing that actually, as I keep digesting and hearing, that makes us different is that we have that soul. So we have free will. Man has free will, where other animals and beings and things don't have that same free will.
Right. Do everybody understand what you mean by that?
You have a choice.
It's
We have a choice to live how we want to live instead of going by a certain way of living that animals have to in order for, I can't explain it, but certain animals play a certain part where they have to play, and humans, we don't have to.
right.
We can
So
do
instinct.
anything, you know what I mean?
Right. So they function off of instinct and instinct alone, whereas you have the use of instinct and reason. So that's the thing that you have over everything else that's created, is the ability to reason, where they don't. Islam.
So like if you die, even though your dog loved you, he gonna eat you if you get hungry on the second week.
Because that's what he
Nobody
does.
finds, right?
I know
That's what he does.
Right, watch it. Right, but why you go there?
Well, I mean, that's the reason.
That's his instinct is to
That's
feed
their
himself.
instinct. That's what they would do. They're dogs. That's,
Right.
His instinct.
That what it
That was
is?
a kind of graphic.
Right,
one.
right. I mean, all I'm saying is a big rap. Yes. He ain't gonna mind.
Islam, I guess that's why in certain religions they say don't have a dog.
That was graphic for the nurse practitioner in the room.
But we get the
We
point.
get the point. We get the
Islam.
point. Islam. The higher self is justice, mercy, love, and right. The lower self is what the higher self is not. The lower self breeds hatred, slander, lewdness, murder, theft, and everything that harms. The higher self is mother of the virtues and the harmonies of life. The lower self is rich in promises, but poor in blessedness and peace. It offers pleasure, joy, and satisfying gain, but gives unrest, misery, and death. It gives men apples that are lovely to the eye and pleasant to the smell. Their cores are full of bitterness and gall. Now, when I think about this, I think about one of the first times I ever came to the temple, and you actually did a lesson about this. And I was like, okay, wait a minute. And I'm trying to find all these significant things from past experiences. So, you care to illustrate that?
Well, I think it says that the lower self is rich in promise, but poor in blessedness. So where do you want to be at? Do you want to be in your lower self or your higher self? Who want to be in the lower self? Just stay there.
I'm good. I'll pass.
So y'all being fake. Y'all
I
being
want
fake.
to be in my lower self and stay
Yeah.
there. It does nothing for my spirit. Oh.
So what? Like we can't. We don't.
What about when you eating a steak? What about when you eat some shrimp?
What about when you eat
Hold
some
up.
candy?
Right, when you eat some candy, a perfect example. So those are things that we enjoy because of our lower self. Those are things that we're able to taste and feel and touch. who didn't like making their kids? You know what I'm saying? Again, so right. So this is our lower self. So we do have some attributes of our lower self that we so enjoy and love. However, with our higher self, it just has this higher thing. But we can't just live at the higher level. We're gonna come down. And for instance, let's say somebody come up and they, you know, you walking with your girl, y'all chilling, and he just come up and slap your girl. See, now the lower self is he has to handle his business. You know what I'm saying? So we have, you know, we have to be prepared in both instances. So we have to train our higher self in order to be able to control our lower self. So when it's saying here that the lower self is rich in promise, so we have to beware. That's what it's saying to us. We have to beware because the lower self in a minute will say, I got you. Now, have you ever experienced that when somebody say, oh, don't worry about it, I got you? No, don't worry about it, I got you. You know, and what happens? They ain't get you. They ain't get you. Yep, they ain't get you. But that's because, not because they intended that. That's because it's not a grip on the lower self. And it's not a grip on the higher self. They just out here. So but once you get a grip on who you are, your higher and lower self, you're able to influence the lower self to say, okay, I'm gonna try to get that. However, I may not get to it until this time. Then the person's not waiting on it, you know, because the lower self is real quick to agree to something, real quick to say, yeah, I got you satisfied. It want to do all the things that it want to do because it's so enjoyable. You know, all the candy you can have. You know, I had this little kid's bag of candy, and he told me to hold it, and I was holding it, and this big guy, he's probably about 6'8", about 300 pounds, came up and took the candy. He was eating that little boy's candy. He told me he was gonna beat me up if I didn't let him eat it. So when little boy came back, I let him know that big guy came, ate the candy, and was gone. You know, he came, sure did. So we had to watch our lower self because it do all kind of things. You know, the big guy only intended to eat one piece, but got carried away and ate half of that bag. So we had to do our things. So do everybody have at least a concept of the higher self and the lower self, like in a balance? That we can't go around just speaking all of this good stuff all the time. That there's a balance in there between our higher self and our lower self. Like I know that even if I'm talking to a person that's a preacher and he's the best preacher that I know, or I'm talking to a person that's an imam, he's the best imam that I know he probably get home and he might cuss sometime. He might do some things that's unsavory. I still know that he's a person. He's a human being. And he has ups and downs, just like I have. So I have to address him accordingly. I can't deify. In Christianity or in a lot of other religions, and in life period, I would have to say, I couldn't just say Christianity. We have a tendency of deifying someone. You know, somebody go, well, hey, I'm up here and I speak this and I'm saying this. Somehow I got to be out of here and be perfect. No, I'm just me. Don't try to put me up there. You get up there. You get up on that pedestal. I ain't getting up there. I got the same problems you have, and I'm trying to solve the same issues you are. So I don't have no judgment. And at the same time, I'm not going to put a yoke around my own neck. You know, Islam.
We see that if you watch the news, you see it all the time.
Right.
Something happened, and they're like, oh my goodness, I can't believe that law enforcement person got in trouble for breaking the law.
Right.
Why? Because they were human. I can't believe that doctor got in trouble or that doctor got sick. Why? Because the doctor wasn't supposed to get sick. I mean, and we do those things, just like you were saying, across a lot of things. I can't believe that mechanic's car is broken. He can't fix it. Why? Why can't you believe it? But we do that. And those are some of the things that we have to think about. We have to realize that regardless of the person's profession or what they do, or, you know, that who they really are is that person that's just like every other person in the true sense.
And in a lot of instances, we can help people along the way. Like somebody can say, hey, you know, I need to get this done. And the person go, yeah, I got you, I got it. You say, well, hold on. You know what I'm saying? Do you want to do it on this day or this day? Because you know that the person is overloading themselves. So you have to, you also are partaking in that agreement. So when someone says he's going to do something, then you need to be able to say, Is that person capable of doing it? Is the person reliable? Or how can I help them be reliable? How can I make it easy for them? So I'll say, hey, you know, you're gonna do this, then this is what I need for you to do. Just how about on Thursday instead of Tuesday? Because I know you got something to do on Tuesday. So and I know you want to help. So can you get it done by Thursday? Well, sure. Okay, great. I'll remind you Wednesday to do it Thursday. You know what I'm saying? So those are the ways in which we have to learn to engage each other through love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. And love is not what we currently been taught. You know, love is the manifestation of your body that you have now and the treatment of it. So if we can't love our own selves from a law to a law, then how are you planning on getting anything done? If somebody go, well, hey, I just love my child, you know, that's it. I don't love their child, you know. But your child need to marry somebody. So it don't make sense, right? So we have to understand the truth of love and truth, peace, freedom, all of those things, start practicing them as opposed to what we've been taught. We have to get out of that and get into assisting one another and helping one another, you know, and loving one another. I see a brother, you know, it was so weird that I tell brothers, I say, love you, brother, you know, looking at me like, huh? Yeah, man, I love you, bro. Well, I love you too.
Right.
You know, right.
We don't know what to say to that.
Right.
They caught off guard.
Which is crazy because how come I can't love you? You know, what would be the problem with me loving you? You know, that's the thing that we're supposed to be doing. And that's the thing that we kept away from. When you view the majority of the people that's looking like I look, when you view them on TV, you often see negative aspects. And you often saying, well, you know, that's not me. I don't like him. You know, I don't like that, you know. But that same person is struggling. The same brother that went out here and shot up 10 people, he's struggling. The same brother that went out here and helped 10 people, he's struggling. So it's up to us to express love in a way in which we all can grow because we need it. We need it very, very bad. And the prophet came to us to tell us that we are to uplift fallen humanity. Well, who is fallen humanity? That would be us.
We are.
So we need to uplift each other with these things that we speak about. And you know, we often go, like she'll call me having a problem with something and then be like, I said, okay, well, is that the lower self there or what? Yes, it is.
Yes, it is.
Letting it out. Okay. But she's, you know, but being able to term what it is allows you to differentiate between the two. Saying, okay, that's all lower self behavior. And I'm gonna read this one where it says what lower self behavior is. Number 11, if you read number 11, it says the lower self breeds. Now, the key word there is breed. Do we know what breed means?
To give birth to.
It
going.
Right. So the lower self breeding. And what it breeds is hatred, slander, lewdness, murder, theft, and everything that harms. So that's the lower self. So when I asked you, are you in your lower self, you thinking these things, man, murder and harm. Well, but you realize and say, okay, I don't want to be there. So we go to the higher self. The higher self is the mother of virtue and the harmonies of life. Things that are harmonious, things that's working with you. So I have to work with you to be in harmony with you, to try to work these things through. The other way around, I'm in the lower self. And I'm gonna hurt, harm, murder, be malicious, rude, obnoxious. All those things are the lower self. And that's what it breeds. It breeds all those things that harm. So those are the things that we don't want to be. Islam?
And we might say, well, I'm not getting ready to go kill somebody. But
No.
sometimes we think about it, and the unity of man is actually also the unity within man. And you think these horrible thoughts or do these horrible things because you're thinking them, not because you're actually doing them outside of there. It's the intent that is there, that it's in your brain, and you're actually destroying yourself. And that's one of the basic foundations of psychology, that, okay, we got to work on you in order to help you. So number 14 says, if you would ask me what to study, I would say yourselves, and you well have studied them, and then would ask me what to study next, I would reply yourselves. So regardless of how well we think we know ourselves, there's always something new that we can learn about ourselves.
Islam. Now, that's number 14. He said, if you would ask me what to study, I would say yourselves. What is he talking about? Is he talking about you? Talking about you? Exactly. He's talking about yourself, the parts of you that are separated. They're not separated in the fact that they can leave and go. Well, they actually can. The body can die off, then your soul die off. Keep going. However, he's talking about understanding the lower and the higher selves, understanding their functions and things they do. When we read out of our Quran, it gives us a lot of examples to use to understand what the lower self is, what the higher self is. So he said that if it's anything that I would have you study, it would be yourselves, those things, that higher and that lower self. So how many selves is it? Two, the higher self and the lower self. So those are the things that he's saying that you should study. So you should study what is the higher self, or you should study what is the lower self. Now why would you think he would be saying that? Anybody? On this side over here, huh?
Define balance.
To define, yes, that is. Anybody else over here? Why would he be saying to study those two things, the selves, the lower self and the higher self? It's on, brother.
Because when you better understand those two selves, you can understand everything that you connected to, everything around you.
Islam. You can come into harmony with that just by understanding it. Because when I look at somebody and I can see where they're coming from, it's easy. It don't take me a couple minutes now, straight lower self. That's how I be. I be talking to straight lower self. Here it come, you know. And I work with people, and I work with Europeans while I'm working. And a lot of times they come with the attitude attached to it, being that, hey, I'm this privileged person. And they come up and they don't mean anything by it. It's not like they're trying to do anything. I've been my whole life, I went to school, Europeans, everything else. But I've often encountered it, you know. So they come with this spiritual, with this separate belief that somehow their life that they're lived is going to allow them to be able to come in and just start going at it. When you say, hold on, wait a minute, straight lower self. You see, so I have to recognize it. Then I have to slow them down, and then I have to uplift. So am I just responsible for uplifting my own people? No. All of humanity has failed as a result of us falling. So all of humanity followed us down. You see, there was rock and roll. You seen there was pop, and you see the whole world had rock and roll. The whole world had pop. Now rap, but the whole world followed us in rap, didn't it? The whole world followed us into the toilet. So it's up to us to uplift, and it will follow us to an uplifting. So because somebody is European doesn't make them your foe. It makes them the same as you are. It's just their earthly salvation is in Christianity. And if you follow that, then that won't help your earthly salvation. So you need to follow your earthly salvation, and they need to follow their earthly salvation so that you can become the best that you can be. Our people cannot be the best they can be following in somebody else's earthly salvation. We're helping them live great, but you know, we ain't doing so well. You know, Islam.
And you know, growth actually comes from being a little bit uncomfortable. And I am like, I'm uncomfortable a lot of times. And people always tell me they don't realize it. Really? That was uncomfortable to you? I'm uncomfortable a lot of times. I was uncomfortable when I first came to the temple and heard some things, because what are they talking about? Like, and I didn't come from a Christian church at that time, although I had been in one. I came from a place of spirituality, my own spirituality. But there were so many things, and what would happen is I would get these things confused. Even though I realized there was earthly salvation, there was divine salvation, I would often try to intermix the two things. So as I'm going on this journey, I'm figuring out ways and learning ways to where I can separate the two in the context that they need to be separated. Not that they're two completely separate things,
Right.
but that they're separated in the way that they need to be separated for my brain to actually understand and be able to utilize the information that's put there for me.
Islam. Anybody? So
Anybody?
everybody was already clear on the two salvations, the earthly and the earthly salvation and our spiritual salvation. He was clear on that already. That's the part the ones, right?
So, right, Bob?
It's love, it's love, it's love.
It's love.
So we got,
You know, there's something that spoke to me too is we talk about the higher self and the lower self and the way that it's spelled when we talk about selves. So when I first heard it and I didn't have a Quran in front of me, I was thinking selves, SELFS, because that just made sense in my brain. You know, all that education, the education said you couldn't possibly be saying it any other way. However, as I look at it now, I think about it differently. But there's a reason for me to even look that deep. It was explained to me. And one of the best examples that I've heard of, you know, we're talking about study yourselves, came from Brother Murray the Third Day. Could you care to illustrate?
Yeah, I can. Islam.
Islam.
First, rise to give perfect praise to Allah, honor to our holy and illustrious and divine prophet, Noble Drew Ali. So when we look at this lesson, the unity of life, and we deal with selves and selves, it's very important to get a grasp that SELVES would be a plural of something, being there's two things. It says man has two selves, SELFS, which is plural and singular at the same time. So that's two different divisions of man. It's a divinity in man. All right, so that's the spiritual and matter portion of man. So we seek for the higher self, which is, they told you in this lesson, the higher self is for you to understand and know that Allah and man are one. So that's what we're dealing with, the two selves, SELFS.
Islam. But you know, when we read this, a lot of times, words sometimes, like the sister was saying from the beginning, that the words that the prophet used, he used with precision. And then as we get up into our day, a lot of words took on slang and just non-usage. They became a little flat. But you have to go and look these words up so that you can get root words to them and stay on point with what the prophet was trying to convey. And in this one, if it said if you would ask me what to study, I would say your parts. I would say your parts, and you will have studied them. And then when you ask me what to study next, I would say, reply, your parts. So yourselves, your parts. So he's saying, study your parts. So that's what your function is to continue to study and study your parts. And as you study them, like the brother said here, you will find yourself in harmony with the things around you, particularly people. And some people will just look at you and they won't really even say anything. And then they look at the person right next to you and say some of the stupidest stuff. Because the peace will abode on you. Once you start figuring these things out, the peace will be there. And when people look at you, sometimes they don't even know what it is. But remember, we're connected by a cord. Whether you want to be or not, you're connected by a cord. So even though they're not utilizing their higher self, when you look at them, they higher self can see you in your higher self and automatically shut their mouth. And they'll turn right next to the person next to you and say the stupidest thing. And you'll be like, wow, that's something, you know. But that's as we begin to develop. We begin to what? Know ourselves, know our parts, know our individual parts. Islam? Well, do anybody have any questions? Because it's going to be necessary to close out because we're running a little over. Anybody have any questions about anything before we close out?
Say that smarter.
Dang, go. Yeah. You ready?
Christian.
Islam.
We ready? You ready? We ready? Allah.
Allah, learn your hearts and minds back to our Indian forefathers,
Divine creed
divine creed and customs.
and principle.
This we ask in thy holy name, the seven Elohim, Amen.
Amen.
Continue to remain standing. We'll do the Moorish American prayer and close as well. Allah,
Allah,
Father of the universe,
Father of the universe,
Father of love,
Father of love,
truth,
truth,
peace, freedom,
freedom,
and justice.
and justice.
Allah is my protector,
Allah is my protector,
my guide,
my guide,
and my salvation.
and my salvation.
By night
By night
and by day.
and by day.
Through his holy prophet,
Through his holy prophet,
through Ali.
through our lady.
Amen. Islam.
Islam. We want to thank everybody for coming out today. We appreciate you coming, and it's nice to see a lot of faces again. So, but if you have any questions, even now, you can still ask them. We'll remain around a little bit until you can get those, brother. Islam, you want to? You are?
I don't think I did it.
What up? Yeah, he's good. He was in the garage, and I was like, man, it's too cold, but they want to still be up, and they want to move around, and they want to. So he went and he slept.